I'll never forget what happened at that scout camp. I went there with high expectations, thinking it would be a fun weekend full of bonfires and stories. But what we experienced there, I could never have imagined. It was the first night, and all of us scouts gathered around the bonfire telling stories. Then, in the middle of the night, one of the camp leaders disappeared. It wasn't just a simple disappearance. He was right there, talking to everyone, and suddenly, no one could find him. We thought it was a joke, but no one saw him again, not even at the camp. The next day, no one spoke about the disappearance. Some of the leaders were visibly uncomfortable, and the atmosphere was strange. But the other scouts and I kept going with our activities as if nothing had happened. Then, at dusk, we started hearing strange sounds coming from the forest, like someone walking around, but no one showed up. At first, we tried to ignore it, but the shadows between the trees started to feel more threatening, and I swear I could hear something dragging itself in there. It wasn't just the wind or animals, it was something different, something malevolent. It wasn't until that night, the second night, that things started to get really bizarre. We were all in our tents when we began to hear knocks on the trees. It wasn't branches breaking, it was loud thumps, like someone was hitting the trees with a hammer. I thought it was an animal, but when I looked through the crack in my tent, I saw a strange figure standing among the trees. It wasn't walking, it was just standing there, watching. But the weirdest thing was, no matter how loud we shouted, no one else seemed to hear. It was like it was happening only to me. The missing leader appeared, but it wasn't him. It was a figure dressed exactly like him, with the same scout uniform. He looked like a distorted version of him, with hollow eyes and pale skin. When he looked at us, his lips moved, but I couldn't hear any sound. The feeling was that he wanted to call us, but something inside me told me we shouldn't go near him. Fear took over me, and in a panic, I woke up the other scouts. When we went to the area where he was, there was no one there. All that remained was a trail of footprints that disappeared into the forest. The next morning, the scout camp was evacuated. There was no official explanation for what happened, but those of us who were there, like me, know that what we experienced was real. I don't know if it was a spirit, an entity, or something we couldn't understand. But one thing is certain. Whatever was there was not human. The leaders never spoke about what happened, but in the exchanged looks between them, it was clear that something was being hidden. To this day, when I look at the forest, I feel a strange presence, like I'm being watched. Something is still there, waiting. I never went back to a scout camp again. I don't know if I'll ever understand what happened at that place, but I know it wasn't just a nightmare. And if you ever go camping in an isolated place, remember, there are things in the shadows that should not be seen. I never imagined that the scout trip would end that way. We went on a camping trip in the middle of a dense forest, far from any city. It was an opportunity to explore nature, learn new things, and of course have fun. The weather was perfect at first, but soon something strange started happening. During the first night, while we were sitting around the campfire, we heard a noise coming from the forest. It wasn't the typical sound of animals, but something heavier, like footsteps. At first, we thought it was one of the leaders playing a prank on us, but no one appeared. On the second night, the sound grew louder. It was as if someone was walking around our camp, stopping every now and then like they were watching us. I knew I shouldn't worry after all. We were at a scout camp, right? But the uncomfortable feeling wouldn't leave me. The others were starting to get nervous too, and one of the leaders decided it would be best to do a round through the area. However, when he returned, his face was pale, and he looked like he had seen a ghost. He didn't want to talk about what he had found, but everyone could tell something was wrong. On the third night, things got worse. In the dead of silence, we woke up to a scream, the sound of something, or someone, running through the forest. We all rushed out of our tents, but there was nothing there. That's when I heard something that made my blood run cold. A voice, low, almost whispering, was saying my name. I froze. It was impossible because no one else was there but us. The voice seemed to be coming from a distant point in the forest. But what was strangest was that it seemed to know exactly where I was. I couldn't understand what was happening, but panic began to take over my mind. The older leader, trying to stay calm, gathered us in a circle and told us we needed to leave as quickly as possible. But before we could gather our things, something interrupted us. A loud, dragging sound, like something being pulled along the ground, echoed through the forest. We all stared into the darkness, but there was nothing visible. However, the feeling that we weren't alone anymore was undeniable. We started running, with no clear direction, just wanting to get out of that cursed place. But the forest seemed to swallow us, making us turn in circles as if it was trapping us there. In the middle of our escape, one of our friends disappeared. I didn't know if he had fallen or if something had taken him, but when we regrouped, he was gone. The tents were empty and everything seemed quieter than before. A bone-chilling feeling took over us, and every step we took only led us further from safety. Yet the forest felt endless, and the noises, distant screams, and that voice calling my name seemed to grow more real. We finally managed to reach the road, but when I looked back, I saw something I'll never forget. A pale figure, hooded, was standing at the edge of the forest, watching us. I don't know if it was a delirium, exhaustion, or pure terror, but since that day I've never trusted campgrounds again. Not forests. And especially, never again did I hear my name called from the darkness. I never imagined that the scout camp would be the place where I'd have to fight for my life. Everything seemed perfect when we arrived at the camp. We were there to learn how to light fires, set up tents, and live in nature. But on the second night, something went wrong. We were sitting around the campfire, joking and talking, when one of the leaders shouted for silence. He had heard something. It was a strange, distant sound, but it made us freeze. When we asked what he had heard, he just said, "Stay calm, it's probably just an animal." But no one felt calm. That same night, when we went to sleep, a strange feeling took over everyone. The sound of the forest seemed heavier, more threatening. I was about to fall asleep when I heard a noise outside the tent. It was footsteps, but heavy, dragging footsteps, enough to make me tense. I thought it was one of the other scouts trying to play a prank, but when I looked out of the tent window, I saw no one. The next day, no one talked about what happened, but everyone was quiet, as if the forest was watching us. Tension grew on the third night. We were all gathered inside the tent when we heard a scream. Not a normal scream, but something desperate. We ran outside, but when we reached the spot, we only found one of the scouts' backpacks lying on the ground, the lantern still on, lighting up the darkness. That's when we saw what was really happening. A figure with a mask, dressed strangely, appeared between the trees, watching us. Our hearts raced. Panic took over, and the leaders began organizing our escape. But it wasn't that simple. The masked figure wasn't alone. Suddenly, other men, all wearing masks and dirty clothes, emerged from the shadows. The oldest leader ordered us to run, and that's exactly what we did. We ran like never before, not knowing where to go, just trying to escape something we couldn't understand. The scout camp, which once seemed like a safe place, was now a prison, and the screams echoed through the forest as we tried to get away as fast as possible. At some point, I got separated from the group. Panic had made me run anywhere aimlessly, but as I was running, something made me look back. There he was, the masked man, right behind me. His footsteps were getting closer, and I knew that if he caught me, there'd be no chance of escape. I didn't know how, but something inside me made me run faster, like my life depended on it, and maybe it did. When I finally spotted the road in the distance, I gave it everything I had and managed to reach safety, but not without seeing one last thing that froze me to the bone. There, standing in the middle of the forest, I saw the other masked men watching. They were moving away, but one of them, their leader, made a motion as if pointing at me. I froze for a moment, but then, like an impulse, I ran to the road where rescue was waiting for me. To this day, I don't know how we were chosen for that night, but one thing is certain. I never saw that camp the same way again. I never trusted the darkness of the forest. And whenever someone talks about scouts, my stomach turns because I know that no matter how much we tried to run, it was all still there, watching,